Welcome to another edition of Believe in Giants. Bob Papa with two-time Super Bowl champion Carl Banks. So glad you can join us. Banksy, here we are again. You know, the draft is on its way here. You got the social media experts all chiming in on things. And I know that it's an exciting time if you're a Giants fan because they did address a lot of cool needs in free agency.
They did. And I have thoughts, Bob.
I know you do.
And it's, I'm sitting, I was actually in LA talking to a friend, and the thought occurred to me that with everything that's going on that's positive with this Giant team, the existing players, some have to take the next step. Others are at a crossroads / inflection point. And others just got to improve. And I thought about it, and I thought three key players in this Giant organization have to take the next step in terms of leadership, in terms of skill set, and in terms of availability. And someone had posted a picture of Evan Neal, which I was so happy to see that he's working with Willie Anderson. And I said, that's great. But let's not confuse a picture of a new stance with an improved football player, right? And I said, what would be great if he could spend a week, I said 2 weeks, but a week would do it. And he could take Willie Anderson with him. Go to LA, spend a week with Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau, invite Azeez Ojulari. Evan Neal, invite Matt Pert. Now, why these guys? Because, first of all, Kayvon Thibodeau is an animal in terms of working out. He's going to be ready to go because he puts the work in. How does that benefit a guy like Evan Neal? Well, Evan, there's questions about a lot of things when it comes to you. Mainly, we want to know about, are you going to be the guy that is the bookend for Andrew Thomas? For everything that this team has done offensively in terms of getting the quarterback weapons, they don't mean a damn thing if you can't block. If you can't get them blocked, it means nothing, right? I said Kayvon Thibodeau for two reasons. One, he's at that point now to where he is, even in his second year, ready to assume a leadership position within this defense. He's mature. He's a hard worker. He leads by example. That example can be set by saying, hey, big fella, let's get some work. I hear you working with Willie Anderson. Iron sharpens iron. Come, let's get some field work, right? Let's test what you've been doing. Let's not do the Ben Simmons thing, right? Where we post something on social and then you show up and nothing looks different, right? And I'm not saying that that's the case with Evan Neal, but there are a lot of questions. People have questions. I have questions. Coaches have questions. What you put on tape, right? I want you to feel the rush of Hassan Riddick this offseason, not when you play him. There's very limited time to get this work in and to really work and hone the technique and the fundamentals when you're in season. Training camp, it's a lot going on. And I use this basketball analogy. If it's free throws that you got to get better at, then you should be working on free throws. You can specialize in free throws this time of year. You can shoot as many as you want. You go work with one of your teammates, right? and this is not uncommon, but iron sharpens iron. Why Azeez Ojulari? I
Giants
said
need Azeez to be Azeez from 2 years ago.
Azeez wakes up in the morning. I say it all the time. He can get out of bed rushing the passer, but he ain't available as much as they need him. Is if this defense, and the other part is I want some of what Kayvon Thibodeau does in terms of his work ethic to rub off on Azeez Ojulari. I'm not accusing the kid of not being a hard worker, but there's different types of work and there's different types of mindset as you do the work. Being in that environment together, those guys can really get each other better. Kayvon, who's on the right on the precipice of being a leader. This is the next step for him because all the other things he does right.
Well, I mean, listen, when the Giant after Andrew Thomas's rookie season, there was a lot of pundits out there that said the Giants of the offensive linemen that were still on the board that they could have picked, that were on the board, that the Giants took the worst one, and the way it's turned out is they took the best one.
Yeah, my good friend Louis Riddick was very vocal about that, saying what a big mistake Andrew Thomas was, and yeah, ended up being the best one, but he worked at it.
So I guess I don't understand the Evan Neal overreaction by fans out there.
Because well, here's the thing, and we'll get into that on the latter half of this, because Giant fans are triggered because of the trauma that they've gone through. You had Eric Flowers.
Ooh, forgot about
Flowers, that. Right? Looked the part, supposed to be very athletic, had zero compatibility with the projection and the actual execution of his abilities. There was no compatibility, and it showed up every week. So when you have a guy like that you had to suffer through every top draft choice, that is what's ingrained in your head at that position.
I forgot he was even, I forgot.
I mean, listen,
I blocked that all out.
I sympathize in a lot of areas with Giants fans. Now, I can get on their case a lot about a lot of things, but there's some trauma that at that position for years that they had to endure. And that's why they don't know until they know. And I think for Evan Neal, he's got it, but he is at a crossroads too. As a young player, you either take the next step or you just continue to get better, but never really get to where you need to go. And the best way to do that is to be able to spend that time working on the technique. You got a new technique you're trying out, try it out on some guys this offseason in a controlled environment where you can talk through it. Okay, what did I do wrong? Right? What did I do right? And Azeez Ojulari can give him Hassan Reddick speed. Kayvon Thibodeau can give him a complete bag of different pass rush moves. That's what he should be working on as he's working out his new technique. Matt Pert, you're along for the ride, but you need to take the step. Azeez Ojulari, you need to work out with Kayvon Thibodeau. Not just field work, but you need to work out. Develop a mentality, because I said it. He and his body have to get a contract and they've got to make an agreement, because he could be a game changer for this defense if him and his body can get on the same page. They're not. He gets nicked and he's gone for a while. And that's, far be it for me to talk about what a player's pain threshold is or what he's being diagnosed with from trainers. But I can tell you, availability is health and it is mentality, right? He's got to develop it. He's got to develop it for the sake of his teammates on that defense, because you cannot you can't field a defense that was as bad as the Giants were this past season and expect the success that they have, from 20 yards in. You got to be good all over the field. You got to be able to impact the game all over the field. And he allows them to do that. So I think those guys should work together, and it's good run. It's good to know what your teammates are doing outside of the building, how they're working out. You can bring something, they can bring something. And, I don't want to sound like the old school guy because I think modern players do it. They have these pass rush summits and all of this stuff. But it was nothing for, Pepper to say, come to Detroit, let's work on some stuff, or O.J. Anderson saying, hey, we're going to go out into we had access to the Giants practice field. This is when we could just enter and work out before collective bargaining. It'll be O.J. Anderson and Dave Meggett. And if Mark was in town, he'd do it. But Howard Cross, we're going to work on our pass coverage. Let's go work on some stuff, right? And it would be myself. It would be Pepper, Meggett. It'd be some other linebackers. Just got our best route runners in Tony Galbraith. And we just go out and just work on our trail technique, all of that stuff, just getting field work in, right? And then there would be William Roberts and Eric Moore. Come on, let's work on some pass rush stuff, right? Controlled, but we're working stuff out, right? And then, guys go to Florida. If a guy lived in Florida and he wasn't going to be in the building, we get some guys to go down and work out with those guys, because some guys worked out differently. And you want to get a taste of that. And that's what alpha leadership is about. I think that's what Kayvon Thibodeau is about in terms of how he works out and how he prepares. And I think that can rub off on a guy like Azeez. And then just them getting the work in, as young players, iron sharpens iron. Let's go, Evan. Evan, we need, they need you. And I'm saying this in third person when I say we need you, is meaning those guys are saying to him, we need you to be the next step. We're adding pieces. We got to hit the ground running this year. Everybody's got us saying we're not going to be as good as we were last year. You're not going to get better. You're soft. Let's get this work in. Those are key players. For all the acquisitions, those 3/4 players, because they need a reliable guy as a backup tackle. And Matt Pert is doing himself a favor by getting this work in too and showing up to camp and wowing coaches. And they're like, well, what the hell did he do this offseason? Okay, we got a guy. We got a backup, or we got a guy who can challenge, or if a guy gets hurt, we have no problem sliding him in.
That's good. That's a good point. You brought up a lot of good points, including one of them in the fact that that's how the game has changed so much with the offseason program pushed back.
Mm-hmm.
Players not allowed to be on the field. They have to create their own sort of extended offseason programs, and even training camp when you're only practicing once a day. And it's one practice a day, and it's a lot of mental.
It's all
reps,
scripted,
and it's all walkthroughs. I remember the one time you were so excited. We were at training camp. This is going back like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was like, they're gonna do goal line. They're gonna do goal line, and you went and you stood right behind the goalpost because you were all fired up to watch live goal line, and it wasn't really live.
It was a walkthrough.
It was like a walkthrough, and you're like,
one step thud,
yeah. As opposed to, listen, it's great for the players as far as safety is concerned, but you're right.
I'm all for it, but you don't get this chance, right? And the thing is, we don't see especially young player improvements probably until the midway of the year, when they've seen enough and had enough reps, bad or good, to start to turn the corner. You can cut that curve in half by getting the work in now, working on the technique. If whatever Will Anderson is working with you on, go try it out. Go try it out. And no different is, and basketball is the best analogy you can have because you can work on things, but you still got to see if it's going to work in the game, right? They go play pickup basketball all summer long. You know, the guys are working on something. If they're working on their jump shot, they'll go play a pickup game and all they'll do is shoot jumpers because all the other things they do well, they're like, I got that part. I need to work on my jumper. Now I'm going to put it in competition. So when training camp starts and when the season starts, I'm comfortable shooting this shot, right? Or, like I said, if it's a free throw situation and your percentages are low and they should be higher, then you got to work on them. You know, and I use the Ben Simmons analogy because, and I'm not shitting on the kid, but it's quite apparent when you get worse at free throws, you're not practicing free throws, right? His percentage has gone down. It's the easiest shot if you work at it, right? And all the other things, he's not a good outside shooter and he's gotten worse to the point now where the team says, never mind, you're done for the year. You can't be that football player. And granted, basketball players have more access to do more things that they need to work on, but you can create these controlled environments in football against guys that need to work like you do. And you know, I used the Ben Simmons analogy, but let me just go back even further because Magic Johnson and I are friends. They said he couldn't shoot, right? He spent the whole summer, and I was there watching it, taking hundreds of shots, outside shots. And after that, he'd go run a pickup game. Him and Isaiah Thomas and Mark Aguirre and Herb Williams and all those guys, Doc Rivers, they run a pickup game in East Lansing, Michigan. And all he would do in that game is shoot jump shots. And then after those games were over with, he'd shoot more jump shots because he knew he could drive, you know.
He had all,
but he worked.
He had the rest of it down.
Yeah, he worked on the things that they said he wasn't good at, but he did it in a practice environment, somewhat controlled environment, but he put the technique in and then he worked it out. He workshopped it. That's what I'm saying needs to happen. And in terms of, like I said, I think Kayvon Thibodeau is their leader. He's one of their leaders. He is moving into that alpha role by example. And I think that's something that could rub off on Azeez Ojulari, and he needs to work. He has not had a lot of football work. Wakes up, like I said, boy can get out. He can get out of his car and rush the passer. Stop at a red light and they say, go get a sack. He can get it when he's available. But he's just not that. And that's a mind-body agreement. You know, I don't know the nature of all of his injuries, but I think availability is a mentality too. And I think that some of that can rub off by working out and seeing, working out with a guy like Kayvon and seeing how he approaches different things. And so that's all I got. And then the other, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like some of these other moves Joe Shane has made from a dollars and cents standpoint with these, some of these 1-year deals. The Giants, I think, lead the world in slot type receivers. They got a lot of them.
Aha. let me tell you about that.
Well, there's a draft coming up.
Yeah. But you know what? Let's just not call them slot type receivers. They are receivers that will function in this spacing and angles offense.
Correct.
This is how the NFL is played now. If you got a Justin Jefferson, God bless you, because he can go get it vertically. A lot of these guys, all these guys got speed to go vertical, right? But when you got a lot of them, and the way they call plays, and folks, we broke down one of the Mike Kafka plays in the Inside the Film Room. What he had to do to scheme some guys open was just, it was miraculous, right? Because he had to do it from week to week and never get game planned. Imagine if we can go back and look at the game Wan'Dale Robinson had, that game he got injured, I think he was over 100 yards receiving.
He was.
Couldn't cover it because they were giving him, they were creating the space in the angles, and he was catching and running. Everybody talks about, well, they don't have, you need a vertical threat. Yeah, all those guys can go vertical. You think Slayton couldn't go vertical? He was open a lot of times vertically, right?
Yeah, Paris Campbell could go vertical.
And Paris Campbell can go vertical, but they can legislate against that. You know, safeties can legislate against that. You got to get the right look in order to say, okay, I got my matchup, he's going to go vertical. How many times you think they're going to let you do that? When you got 4 downs and you got to move the chain, you got to be able to generate 6 that can go for 16 or 3 that can go for 10. And with these types of receivers and the way their play design, the construction of this offense, it's all about that. You know, getting guys on the move. And you got the Kansas City example. You got the Buffalo merger. And when you look at how those offenses are played, that's what they do well. Spacing and angles. Yes, they can go deep. One team has a Travis Kelce. Giants have Waller now. Think he can't go deep? Right? Along with the other receivers, the Campbells and the Slaytons, right? But how do they move the chains? They ain't doing it 30 yards in the air every down or 20 yards in the air every down. And Kansas City does not have a running game. Buffalo does not have a running game, right? But they're still manufacturing yardage with their skill position players by creating the space and angles and guys who can catch it and run with it. You know, when we look at their new addition, who was basically Waller came in the trade to the Giants for him. Look at Kadarius Toney. What they doing with him? He ain't getting a lot of vertical routes, folks.
No.
A lot of angles, a lot of short stuff and run. So this is the NFL. When you look at what Cincinnati does, you see Jamar Chase on a lot of crossing routes. He goes vertical, but there's a lot of crossing. He and the other receiver, both, they're not just, okay, we're just going to line up and go vertical and our quarterback's going to throw it. Number one, you can't protect the quarterback that long, no matter how fast your guys are. If you're trying to hit a 20-yarder, 30-yarder down the field, you can't do it every play, every time you drop back to pass. So you got to have some ways to get guys open in the intermediates. And the way that this offense, the rules are set up for offenses in the NFL, you don't have enough defensive players to cover them. Not if you run the right type of offense. You just can't. Because if you got a 1 and a 2 corner, who's your 3 and your 4 corner? Because all they're going to do is move players around so that they can find the matchups.
Right.
So don't worry so much about the size of the receivers. I think Miami has 2 guys that are 5'10" and under. Pretty good football players, Waddle and Tyreek. I think one's 5'9", the other one's 5'10" or 5'8". And they do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Giants added a lot of speed, which they needed. The tight end and Saquon Barkley are the fulcrums that everything will work off of. And they actually
there's still a job opening, too.
Correct. There's still a job opening. Project Job.
I got to get on the Giants fans, man, that I get the trauma. I get when they get triggered about certain things. But when did we get to the point to where Giants fans are triggered when John Mara says something? The owner who says the least of all owners, and they got so upset when he talked about this job opportunity. And yet he said, that's up to Joe Shane and Brian Dable if they could make it work, and it won't be easy. Oh, why did John Mara needs to stay out of it. That's what's wrong. Wait a minute. John Mara stayed out of it while we watched the roster never improve. John Mara stayed out of it when, for no apparent reason, Eli Manning gets benched and his streak is ended, and he was your best option, right? John Mara stayed out of it. He bit his tongue. He was in tears saying, but I'm going to respect these coaches and let them do what they do, right? So if you ask him about a player, and he said the door isn't closed, but Joe Shane and Dable will have to see if it works. But for him, the door is not closed on a return if it could work out. Well,
just like he said, I want Saquon Barkley as a Giant for life. But with
the offer hasn't improved, right? So fans, I get when you're triggered over past trauma. John Mara, I mean, the narrative that was out there a couple of years ago about John and Chris and all that, go back and look at it now and see if any of it were true, right? And then,
well, listen, there's conspiracy theorists that exist that believe things that are just, they're going to believe it till the cows come home.
If you go back in hindsight and look at it,
doesn't matter. They still
right.
believe it. They still believe it.
But those who are swayed, if you just take a minute, take a tick and think about it and look at it and see if any of it adds up, right? And then ask yourself, like, everybody's triggered out, why is John Mara opening his mouth? Well, there were some times when you probably thought he should have, like, why is he keeping the old general manager? Why is he keeping the president of player personnel when all they've done is X, Y, and Z? Why isn't John Mara doing John Mara's? But he doesn't talk. And then when he finally says something, but then defers to the guys he hired to build this team, why would you think he wants to get in the middle of that? He doesn't.
No, and
he never has.
He was asked if, from an ownership standpoint, based on some of the heavy drama that Odell brought to the plate the first time, would you sign off on bringing that back into your locker room? Now, he's clearly not the same player. He's clearly not the same person in a lot of ways. They got the kid version of Odell.
Yeah.
So they were just asking, would you sign off on that coming back into your building? And he said, yeah, we would welcome him back in, but that's up to Joe and Brian and everybody else as to whether it's financially possible.
Right. Like,
end of story.
Listen,
or schematically.
Right. But there's no team. Let me just be clear. Just based on what I saw from his workout, there's no team that is not interested. Every team is interested in Odell Beckham, or that job, as I should say, hashtag. He brings you something. And again, Giant fans, I get it. You're traumatized. You're triggered by certain things that have happened. But a lot of the narrative about Odell Beckham, you get a chance to meet him, there's not a player. Now, there's let me just, excuse my friends, there's shit that comes with him. Some of it is unintended. But there's not a guy in the entire National Football League who wants to win, who works his whole purpose and everything he does is about being the best he can be and winning football games. Maturity helps. He's got fatherhood in his life now, right? But you're going to get a work ethic. That's never been the issue with him. And if he comes back, and we don't know, there's a lot of teams that are going to be interested in bringing him in at, what they feel is fair market value, right? And he'll probably blow that value through the roof once he gets on the field. But don't be triggered by the name or by an owner who says, yeah, I keep that door open because he's got value.
He certainly
And
does.
a lot in there, and like he did some ill-advised things, right? Like, the Josina Anderson thing, people didn't like it, right? But he said what he thought was his truth at the time, right? And it didn't go over well, clearly. But if you take a minute, and I'm not, I mean, he is who he is. I happen personally to be a fan because of what he puts into getting where he is in terms of his ability. He's gifted, but he works his ass off. And that's good, because he's not the diva who doesn't work. He's the diva who does. And if they feel he's, if a deal can work out, he would be an asset.
Absolutely. I mean, it depends on how much money he wants, guaranteed, and how many years he wants. Because, I mean, at least what you read was he was looking for more than a 1-year deal. He didn't want to just be a rent-a-player at this point in his career, and he wanted some stability. Conversely, my guess is teams are looking at back-to-back ACL surgeries 2 years in a row.
On the same knee.
Yeah, so do I want to sign this guy to a multi-year deal as opposed to the 1 year down the road and then let's kick the tires again? I don't know.
And they're going to and he's going to be managed wherever he goes, just based on the knee history.
Well, everybody gets managed now. Jeez, I mean,
but
if you've been in the league for 2.5 years and you started a bunch of games, you get maintenance day.
Yeah.
At least it's not maintenance games like the NBA. At least it's just maintenance days in practice.
Maintenance weeks for some of these players in the NBA.
You had one more thing you wanted to get to though that I cut you off on.
No, that was it. The John Mara thing. Like, my timeline filled up, and I was like, "What the hell happened?" Mara should shut up. Here we go again. I'm like, wait a minute.
Dude, it's called the owners' meetings. The owners speak at the owners' meetings.
It's his team, by the way. So if he say like somebody, he can say like somebody, but he's never, when people thought he should step in, he didn't, and he got criticized. Like I said, it hurt him to his heart that they benched Eli, and he stayed out of it. Where a lot of owners in this league would have been like, oh, hell no. Unless he's hurt, he's playing. And he's my best option. Or why isn't he taking a more assertive hand in some of these players that they're bringing in his offensive line and blah, 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 blah. So anyway.
Stop with that.
You're smarter than that, Giants fan.
First they complained that he was meddling too much. That he was forcing coaches and GMs to keep Eli, and he was meddling in areas. Now he's turned it over to two guys. He's turned it over to his organization that he hired. He and Mr. Tisch, Steve Tisch, hired Joe Shane, hired, this whole new staff, signed off on all that, and they're letting these people do their job. Like the whole O-line thing. One thing just my final thought on this. Free agency is a truth serum because you can connect players to teams and all this other stuff, but there comes a dollars and cents number. Would the Giants have liked the linebacker from the Buffalo Bills, who they certainly knew? Yeah, but not at that price. And they felt that Bobby Okereke at his price made more sense. Were there other players that the Giants probably would have liked? Sure, but not at this price. We're gonna keep it at this price. And listen, I was shocked that the Giants didn't pursue some of these offensive linemen that were on the street, especially the interior offensive linemen.
Sure, I
was very surprised. So what does that do? Well, that tells you that they believe between Izudu. The other kid that they drafted last year that got hurt, who was having a good camp, Zudu's teammate, McKitchen. They like those guys. And I'm guaranteeing you there's a bunch of people in the draft that play those positions that they really like. And they're like, would we like to have one of these guys on the street? Yeah, but not at a price that doesn't make sense to us because, we want to extend Dexter Lawrence. We want to extend Andrew Thomas. We know we got to deal with a Xavier McKinney contract at some point. So we'll go here and we'll let the draft take care of it. And then there's the whole next wave of free agency after the draft.
I'll just get ready to say, like, folks, understand that Joe Shane and that staff, they played a long game. It's the long tail with them.
Correct.
It's
they were brought in to rebuild and start. The Giants spent the better part of 10 years trying to retool. And where did they get them? They got one playoff appearance, 2016, where they just dumped money. They're trying to build something so that the Giants are a contending team for a big period, not a one-hit wonder.
Yes. And it's understanding the process of player acquisition. Fans, this, free agency and draft. You have no visibility to Joe Shane's board or the personnel boards that they look at. Okay, well, if this team drafts X player, this player is going to be available. If he's not available on draft day, he'll be a camp cut. Like, this process for them, once free agency started, it doesn't end until the trade deadline for the Giants. And you can look at every move they made. Isaiah Hodgins, when did he show up?
Middle of the season.
There you go. So everything they do, this process does not end.
Jared Davis, December.
Yeah. Doesn't end, folks, until literally it started. The improvement in the building of this roster started with free agency, and you guys, and it's not your fault because you don't have the visibility, but just understand you've got competent people working in the front office where they look at this. The start of it was free agency. It ain't ending until the free agent period. So they'll have a team and they'll continue to look to improve it, but there's always a camp cut or two or three, and there's going to be a player that falls into their lap, and it's like, oh, okay. And the Giants are drafting low enough so that those waiver deals, they are higher in the pecking order, right? Doesn't it go from least to first?
No, the Giants are now at the wrong end of that.
The wrong end of it.
Yeah, okay. Last year they were at the good end of it.
Yeah,
but that's fine.
There could be camp trades too.
Yeah, there's gonna be guys that are cut for salary cap reasons once the draft is over.
So, and then if not, then when somebody flashes in camp, there's going to be, like I said, camp cuts or camp trades. So just understand. And, the often used phrase, trust the process, they do have a plan.
So let's use go ahead.
No, Joe Shane and his staff, they have a plan on how they want to build. So the process doesn't end after the draft. I know you guys have your board set for players in free agency and players in the draft, but just start to reprogram yourself to think about players that could become available after the draft, players that could become available during camp, after camp, and even at the trade deadline.
Good stuff, Carl. Iron sharpens iron.
Aziz.
Tell a friend.
Evan.
I like
Evan.
I like the way you end it.
Hurt. Tell a friend to tell a friend.
Believe in Giants. Carl Banks, Bob Papa. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.